Oh man, big podcast. Big podcast. I have Mr. Drutang with me today. This is gonna be a little bit different. You know, guys, I'm usually a little bit conversational. Not that a lot of people watch these anyway, I'll be honest. Sorry, Drew. You know, this is like usually my second channel. I put a bunch of podcasts up here, do whatever. But I think this one is gonna go on Twitter maybe pretty
Yeah, we'll
hard.
get them in the clips.
Because
We'll
I
get them in the
think
clips.
yeah, I think we have a lot to talk about that's current event based today. And last time we did a podcast was 2022 on the Associates, I think, my other podcast with Logan. And we went through a lot of stuff. A lot of it was you predicting, you know, what's going to happen politically, conspiracy wise, what the script is going to be. And a lot of that's come true. And so we're going to dig into that today. Anything to do with Trump, COVID, everything. I got to be careful what I say on YouTube. But, dude, introduce yourself. Say what's up. And let's get into it.
Perfect. All right. Well, yeah, guys, I'm Drew. I go by on Twitter. I'm at Drutang Reborn. And yeah, primarily my content focuses around conspiracy theory type stuff. My main medium is through threads. And I guess my specialty would be basically predictive programming. So taking trends in mainstream media and culture and projecting forward what those ideas will manifest as in real life and when.
Before we jump into all that, I have a question. What do you consider yourself? Because like on some level you're like an Alex Jones. You know, he has done that stuff for years. But he's also more of like he was like a radio host and he's a talk show guy. I know you're into crypto. I know you do a lot of that stuff. What do you consider, like, how do you define yourself?
Yeah, I just, well, I wrote a book, so I just say author, you know?
Okay.
That's
Fair enough.
author, writer, and that's, again, my, like, primary content. You know, I do some, I've done a couple of live stream / podcast appearances over the last week or so. Actually, I just, like, have gotten back into it. But, yeah, primarily I just say author, and I think that you know, that's what I tell them when I cross the border. Like, what do you do? Oh, I'm an author. And then, you know, when they ask about what the book is, you know, I don't go into too much detail.
Fair enough. Okay. Tell me everything. I want to know what you think is, and this hits close to home for me because before I got into business, like my socials are very business centric, but before I got into business, and I've talked about it before. I was watching Alex Jones. I was 15 years old. I'm at my parents' house. I'm a teenager in high school, and I'm just starting to question things. You know, that doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem right. And it's probably why I'm so inclined to be deep into the health stuff, deep into the business stuff, deep into all that, because that was my personal answer to achieve personal freedom, knowing that everything is so corrupt, so broken, all of that. So I'm well versed in a lot of things you're talking about. I want you to go as detailed and deep as possible. What is happening? What are we watching play out? You got the QAnon stuff. You've got over here, you've got the left-wing media on the extremes. And nothing's, you know, it's Russia. You know, over here, it's like Trump's our savior. He's secretly What's reality in your mind as someone that researches this every day and is grounded and down to earth and is a normal human?
Yeah. So it's a struggle to you know, stay grounded, and I think what you just talked about in your own journey is important. It's and it actually helps you wake up even faster. Is getting into health and fitness, and then realizing, oh my gosh, if they, you know, basically everything you're taught as a kid, from the food pyramid to, you know, generally what they tell you about exercise and dieting is just all completely bogus. And then when you start to get into health, then they want you to take a bajillion supplements, which there are some good supplements, don't get me wrong, but it's what they push to you, and then the expectations. They're like using guys on extreme amounts of steroids to be like, oh yeah, buy this supplement and you'll look like this guy. And then when you get through those levels of deception, you're like, they must be lying about more stuff. They can keep this going. Whereas somebody who's, honestly looking for the truth in something as simple as bodybuilding and fitness, and they lie to me a million times, and, what else are they going to lie about? In terms of, what the reality of the situation is it is humbling ultimately, because when you start your journey, like me, for instance, I started to wake up around 2016. Had never really been involved in politics. It was like, actually, to be fair, 2015 primary season for the 2016 election. And I was about to graduate college. I was like 3 years in, and I was researching primarily. I just gotten word about Bitcoin. I was starting to explore Bitcoin and stuff like that, and learning more about the Federal Reserve. And then through that angle, through the angle of learning about money, the Federal Reserve, I was like, okay, that's ultimately a great place to start, because once money is the root of all evil, and once you learn about how money is actually valued and created, you can, it helps you downstream figure out
for me.
a lot of other more, deeper stuff. But anywho, I was a Bernie bro in the 2015 election season, and the next step in the awakening process was seeing the Democrats rig the 2016 primary through the WikiLeaks. When the WikiLeaks were released, it shows that the DNC is not being neutral, as it states in their charter, that they're supposed to be neutral in their primary. Instead, they were clearly rigging it for Hillary Clinton, and then when they were exposed, they fired the head of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but Hillary Clinton immediately hired her onto her own campaign. And anyway, so basically what that showed me is, oh my gosh, now even politics, something as simple as the primary, is being manipulated to the point where my vote doesn't matter whatsoever. I could, and Bernie did very well regardless. The way that Democratic primaries are set up with superdelegates, itself makes it so rigged, with superdelegates are basically just unelected officials within the party that are worth as much as the delegates given based off the voting in the primary. But regardless, those WikiLeaks also exposed Pizzagate, which is a bunch of code words. That'll be a fun one for the YouTube censors. But
Oh boy.
but that just kind of, like, for people who don't know, it basically just gets into like Epstein type stuff, elites and Diddy, Epstein/Diddy type stuff, where there's elite circles
some deep,
that
dark stuff in Pizzagate. There's some deep, dark stuff in Pizzagate.
Yeah. And actually, the reason why that was so important for me is, regardless of if the code words in those WikiLeaks emails are like actually, insinuating the worst case scenario, just seeing how the mainstream media covered that, where it was something that was public, the WikiLeaks have verified, they've never released anything that wasn't true, they've never edited anything. So seeing how the mainstream media, like people that I previously trusted as a Bernie bro, like Stephen Colbert, The Daily Show, those were as a millennial, I'm a political thinker, getting all my news from The Daily Show and Stephen Colbert, just seeing how they covered it was really eye-opening too. And it's like, it was the first thing I saw, first scandal I saw live get covered up in real time.
Was that 2016?
I believe it was 2015, 2016. I don't remember exactly when it fell.
It feels like time since then has just been warped. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if you have any insight on it or if you've felt the same, but it feels like time since then. I was in high school, in 2015, 2016. But the past 10 years, since he came down the escalator, which is about 10 years almost to the day.
Yep.
It's like sped up to some degree, and people are going on different timelines. We fundamentally live in a different reality than most people at this point because of the research that's been done, especially but just the whole our side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, to look and see people rioting or protesting right now
Yeah.
against getting rid of illegals.
Mm-hmm.
They are just living in a completely different reality, and I feel like it wasn't as split before that, or maybe I was just young. I don't know, but it seems like the last 10 years of just this divergence of time.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. It was before basically 9/11 from 2001. We had an external enemy with the war on terror and just kind of what we were taught about 9/11, who did it, why. There was, the country was united around that because we had all been attacked by an outside force, and that's usually that is ultimately
an alleged outside force.
How they unite how they unite people that are, would normally have disagreements in order to gain control of all of them. They introduce an enemy outside of the normal, left-right paradigm, or even in between countries. If you have a universal enemy, then everybody else will unite around opposing that enemy. So, for instance, climate change, overpopulation, that's one thing. And what they do is when they have a outside enemy, then they're allowed to form global governance bodies to oppose that problem. So with climate change, they have these international agreements, the Paris Climate Accords, etc. And each nation basically loses control of their economy due to these international, regulations made by unelected officials, essentially. And of course, COVID's the biggest one, where you had, the domestic policy of all these countries basically being dictated to them by the World Health Organization, and then, being backed up by, international banks offering them loans if they, if they follow the policies of the WHO. But I guess to get to your question about 2016 forward, basically under Obama, in the early 2010s, the narrative kind of switched because the Iraq war was basically over. That's kind of what helped Obama come in, was this idea that he was going to end the Iraq war and all these wars that Bush started. And once that was over, that's basically that saga of the 9/11 saga narrative ended. And then we started on this new, overarching propaganda mission, which was primarily to split the population again. And basically that's when BLM started, and you started to get these riots at the same time. In terms of, to bring this back to how it relates to predictive programming and kind of the methods and how I'm able to predict things, is at that time, around 2013, 2014, I believe, when BLM was just starting, you had the first Purge movie came out. And Purge is like, in terms of when you're talking about these rioters that are living in a completely different universe or whatever, that seems so foreign to the way that we would think, the population has been programmed specifically with these Purge movies primarily to have this idea of there being times and days, certain amounts of time that, lawlessness is allowed and there's no consequences. So those movies, that direct programming, basically, because they've made movies for the last 10 years about them. It's programmed the public subconscious, and now everyone's cool with this idea, and they continue to do it. In 2020, you're keeping all these high schoolers out of school. Everyone's locked inside. And the only time that the media tells you can go outside, and the only time that the police weren't going to stop you, was to go riot. And of course, they were masked up with anybody who knows about mob psychology. Not only is, just the idea of mob psychology is when you're in a large group of people, you will do things that you normally wouldn't do as an individual. When you see a lot of other people doing it,
it's like you get permission.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one aspect of mob psychology. And then in addition to that, if you're wearing a mask, it basically has a compounding effect where it also takes away your individuality because you're wearing a mask, it kind of dehumanizes you, and then again, you're more likely to do things that you normally wouldn't do. So masked up riots in 2020, that was basically like the full fulfillment of the Purge programming. And Jared Kushner, when those riots were going on, Jared Kushner had actually hired the public relations guy from the Purge movies onto the White House staff. So there was some direct coordination between. Of
course there was.
Yeah. So, and you notice too, and this is the thing, is where I'm talking about it being humbling. I went from Bernie bro after the Pizzagate. I was really into the QAnon stuff and kind of believing in the Trump superhero narrative, which is what we're moved into now, which we'll get into, which is basically this Marvel / MAGA Avengers type era, which we'll talk about later as far as the Civil War stuff. But it's humbling because you go from Bernie bro, then I'm like, oh shit, wow, Trump's really the truth, super, alt-right, whatever. And then realize it wasn't until Jan 6 where I realized, oh my God, everybody was where the left, where I was thinking, all these stupid leftoids, they're all programmed by the Purge movies. They're so stupid, they don't even realize what they're doing. I had thought that Trump was going to win 2020, and then the final bit of predictive programming in terms of 2020, the season finale, which I knew was coming, was V for Vendetta, a movie made by the same directors that made The Matrix, which, of course, in The Matrix, if you zoom in on Neo's ID when he's being interrogated, the movie was made in 1999. Neo's ID in that movie expires on 9/11/2001. Those same directors directed V for Vendetta in 2005 or 6, I believe. And V for Vendetta, of course, was originally a comic book written by this guy, Alan Moore, who is he's publicly acclaimed occultist. He's probably one of the most prolific public occultists in this time. And he has quotes where he literally says, all art is magic because it influences the mass subconscious, and it influences and thus influences the way people react to certain situations. And anyways, V for Vendetta, the theme of the movie is basically you have, it's a dystopian future and an authoritarian UK, and you find out during the movie that there was a pandemic that allowed the government to gain more authoritarian control. And you find out during the movie that it was actually a bioweapon released by the government. And then at the end of the movie, they end it because they all follow an anonymous leader that goes by a single letter, Q, it's V. Because they all follow that anonymous leader that goes by a single letter, they end the movie by storming the Capitol. So yeah, so that's what, basically, it was humbling because now I was like, oh, these stupid leftoids doing the Purge side. But then at the end, when Trump loses, they kind of flip the script and they have the right MAGA side basically enact the finale of V for Vendetta, which of course, now we know of how many FBI informants were involved in Jan 6 and kind of how it was, it's referred to as a honeypot, where you basically trap people that oppose you into doing an action, and then arrest them because you've basically got them to overextend themselves.
Question for you. You keep mentioning they.
Mm-hmm.
They do this. This is how they do the programming. This is what the script is. They set it up. In your opinion, and you don't get into things you can't say online, but who is they?
Yeah, so there are some specific groups that you could point to, but in terms of who is enacting this script, there is, there's a group of people in Hollywood. For instance, there's certain, directors and authors that I've identified that have the juice. Like Alan Moore, for example, he says I'm an occultist, whatever. And his movies are some of the ones that or his comic books are some of the ones that most directly reflect reality. And of course, he basically publicly says exactly what they're doing.
Yep.
As far as influencing the mass subconscious. But yeah, it's hard to point to exactly what's going on in general. As you become more wealthy and powerful, you can only hang out in certain circles. All your interests align because you're all trying to maintain your power and keep the public distracted. There's some international bodies that you could point to. The classic, the Freemasons, blah blah blah. But you really can't nail them down exactly
because they're everywhere.
There's public facing individuals like a George Soros or a Bill Gates or something like that. Everything is public. You know how much power they have. You know how much money they spend on their philanthropy, which is basically they donate money to causes they want to. So they say it's all to charity, but in reality, they're just literally making their version of what they want to happen via these NGOs and charitable organizations. But it's hard to get like a single group.
So another question that arises off that, I think a lot of people think that these characters are 100% controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's the case. I think they're acting of their own accord, but they are controlled in the sense that there's blackmail on them.
Yeah.
Or there's, if they step out of line, they get checked a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's accurate? Would you say it's not accurate? How do you view a lot of that?
Yeah, that it really is the ultimate question is how much is order and how much is chaos. And there is certainly, like Alan Moore said, another one of Alan Moore's quotes is he's like, these conspiracy theorists that think everything is controlled, they're like, they're idiots. There's a saying where he's like, I don't know if it was him who said it originally, but he's like, if you're wanted by the CIA, you're safe. But if somebody who has the same name as you and you're wanted by the CIA and there's somebody else that has the same name as you, then they're in trouble. The idea being that the CIA is so incompetent, if they were trying to target you, it's more likely that they'd, hit some random guy instead. I don't really believe that level of incompetence. I think that's like people are like, oh, well, you've never been in government organizations. You don't know how incompetent everyone is. And
there's got to be some stone cold operators that take care of the missions that are important, that don't make mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like every other organization where the top is very compartmentalized and the people all the way up until the very top have no idea what's going on. And you can look at organizations like Scientology where they literally don't tell you what the religion is even about until you have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars and gotten to, you've done these clear rituals and they literally don't tell you the theme of the religion until you get to the top. And it's I assume that's what basically all these organizations are like, where there's the upper echelon who knows what the actual goals are and how they're executing them, and then everybody below them is basically has no idea what they're doing. And you can see it happen in real life. Another thing where people are like, oh, it's impossible for governments or large organizations to successfully do something secretly. But you had the Manhattan Project in the US developing the nuclear bomb. They had compartmentalized it so much that there was thousands of workers across the country that were building one specific part, but they had no idea of the overall project, to the point where when they brought in the new president, they had to read him in, even though he was already a high-ranking official beforehand. They had to read him into the Manhattan Project because he had no idea. And I assume that's basically how all these things run. In terms of individuals, yeah, it is really hard to know exactly how much they know of their role if you're going to say like a Trump or an Elon Musk. I mean, if you look at Trump, he spent his whole life, he had all these different business ventures. The only like overarching theme of all of them was that he was using branding. He was putting his name on everything. Everything was Trump this, Trump that. And it was basically, even when he was starting all the casinos, which all ultimately went bankrupt in Atlantic City, he was basically he was playing the media the whole time. It was always a media game for him in branding. And he reached this, he's in a bunch of movies. He reached the pinnacle of branding in America, which is like, after his, after he wrote a book after The Art of the Deal, he wrote a book, The Art of the Comeback. And in between those two books, he had basically, like I said, gone through this bankruptcy, and all the casinos he started, Atlantic City, went under. The way he came back was literally just started to leverage his brand completely, got the Apprentice TV show, and just focused on Trump-branded real estate, essentially. And of course, that leveraged into becoming president because he had the strongest branding of the country and was basically universally liked, always talked about in rap songs and stuff. So it's hard to tell if he always had that goal. Was he being groomed for that? His family does have some, deep state connections where his uncle, John Trump, MIT professor, the FBI, when they took Nikola Tesla's documents from his hotel room.
It's always crazy to me.
After he died, they gave him right to Uncle John Trump. So, it's not like his family was completely devoid of like deep state connection. So it's a possibility that maybe there was some fandangling and he in some type of, we have this role for you. This is what you're going to do. I don't really have anything too solid on that. But as far as somebody like an Elon Musk, where it gets more suspicious is where you have some much more direct things you can point
with
to
the Technocracy
as
in
far
Canada,
as his,
right?
yeah, as far as his family. So it starts off with his grandfather, Joshua Heldman, I believe is how you say his name. He was arrested during World War II in Canada for leading the Canadian Technocracy Party. Technocracy, of course, is the idea of rule by the experts as opposed to democracy. So take Elon Musk. Instead of having the government run a network of satellites to provide internet all around the world, we have a expert do it. We have an Elon Musk do it. Instead of the government, transitioning to electric cars, we have an expert, Elon Musk, do it. Instead of having, what else is he? Oh yeah, Neuralink. He's basically going to run that. So
The AI stuff.
Yeah, AI. Yep, he helped fund OpenAI originally. Yep. But with him, like I said, his grandfather gets arrested, Technocracy Party. He leaves after the war. He's released. And once the government, though, has already arrested you for being a threat to them, I'm sure it played into him leaving the country. He wasn't directly kicked out, but that's why Elon's family is from South Africa, because his grandpa moved from Canada to South Africa. Then you have Werner von Braun. So that's one connection in terms of that shows that generations before Elon, there was already a stated goal. They wanted to enact a technocracy where an unelected leader gets basically put in charge of the government to make it more efficient, aka Doge. He literally accomplished this. But where it gets really sus is Werner von Braun, the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket that took Apollo 11 to the moon. He basically was, in some ways, the public face of NASA before the Apollo 11 mission. And he actually this guy, Werner von Braun, worked directly with Walt Disney to create fictional programs to put on TV to get the population comfortable with the idea of space travel and kind of what to expect from a moon landing. And the kicker is he was a Nazi scientist that was brought over in Operation Paperclip. He was literally a high-ranking Nazi SS soldier. And yeah, we basically had him in charge of NASA the entire time. All that put aside, he writes a book in 1948 called Project Mars. The book basically describes a human Mars colony. And in the chapter titled How Mars is Governed, he essentially describes a technocracy led by, he says, the leader of the Martian civilization will be given the title Elon. Or, he basically says the leader is given the title Elon in this fictional scenario. So you have Elon is the leader of the Mars colony, written by the guy who's the primary face and kind of the brains behind NASA in general. And you're like, okay, how did they name this kid Elon and just happen to have him be the only one who's obsessed with Mars and the only human ever that has any chance of possibly getting the job done.
Some of it's done on purpose. This is my opinion, my read, and I'm curious what you think. Some of it done on purpose. Some of it certainly controlled. Some of it certainly planned. Obviously predictive programming. But is that predictive programming also casting such a strong spell on the universe that these things manifest themselves at the same time as well? And I think that is the case. And it's a mix. And obviously people are influencing that at the same time. But if I had to guess, that would be part of it.
Yeah, it's ultimately so one of the mottos of that the Freemasons use, that they have various emblems with this inscribed in Latin, which is I think it's Ordo de Chao or something like that. But it translates to order out of chaos.
Yep.
So if you create a chaotic situation, then it allows you to present a solution that brings order, and it makes people beg for order. So
the vaccine's a great example of that.
Exactly. So you create a bioweapon in the Wuhan lab, pretty ineffective overall, but yeah, you create something and then you offer the solution. So for instance, you have a 9/11 and you offer the Patriot Act and the global war on terror, the Iraq war, Afghanistan, as the solution. And people are normally, they would be against wars. But if you created chaos initially, then they beg for the order and then they accept the solution. Same thing with, of course, the pandemic and lockdowns and stuff like that we'd never usually tolerate. But because there's so much chaos, they're allowed to instill that order. In terms of like random events and stuff like what you're saying, I think it is, 50-50 in terms of where Elon, I think you can basically point to, okay, his grandfather wanted technocracy. They named him after the Werner von Braun, which, by the way, Werner von Braun, he likely, was familiar with technocracy. There was a German branch of the Technocracy Party. Yeah. So he's probably tuned in. And obviously he wrote the Mars Project and said, oh yeah, Mars should be run by a technocracy, essentially. So when you have all those things line up where, okay, now I named the one person, Elon, who's going to have the human Mars colony, that's like pretty well set up to the point where, and then you calculate in how many projects of Elon's are basically successful because of government grants and government money that was injected.
A lot of them.
Tesla, Solar City, of course, SpaceX, where that's the other funny thing I get when I'm talking about technocracy. Originally, you have the governments running the moon program and the space program, and now, this is a great example of technocracy, now it's basically been brought entirely private. SpaceX, NASA can't function without SpaceX. SpaceX just had to save astronauts from the International Space Station. And of course, you got Blue Origin, fucking Bezos' little side project, but space is essentially being run mostly by technocrats at this point. But yeah, I mean, in terms of chaos, I'm sure he has freedom of what to do on a day-to-day basis. Oh yeah, I forgot, even Twitter too. So he takes over the main public, social media platform. That Twitter, by the way, was completely responsible for Trump winning 2016 in terms of his, the news cycle was basically, what did Trump tweet today?
Yes.
So because he knew how to use that better, he was able to, take on these crazy odds against the most powerful political machine ever created.
I have a couple questions. Things I'm always curious about. And you're one of the only people I can talk to about it. How many more Epstein Islands are out there?
Well, I think the Diddy thing was pretty eye-opening in terms of okay, so you've got these players in all these different spheres where Jeffrey's international businessman and obviously with Ghislaine Maxwell has ties directly to various intelligence agencies. Maxwell's father was tied in with the CIA, Mossad, and I think KGB as well. He was like a triple agent. So he was tied in with all these intelligence agencies. So you can see that side, and then you have Puff Daddy, just locally running out of Miami, his little freak-off den, and basically controlling the celebrity music industry, basically taking in young rising stars like Usher and Justin Bieber, and basically running MK Ultra on them, where he's drugging them and putting them in sexually traumatic situations. Which, for people who don't know, MK Ultra, it was a government program, a CIA ran brainwashing program, where it's trauma-based mind control, where you break somebody's psyche, especially effective on younger people. You break someone's psyche through trauma, sometimes using psychedelics like LSD. That's what they were testing with. But then also putting them in sexually traumatic situations as well is the most powerful way to break their psyche. And then once it's broken, then they're much more easily influenced and controllable. And that's like basically what MK Ultra ended up being. Yeah.
To jump in, we know about Epstein, we know about Diddy. Here in America, two different industries. I imagine that every country is going to have some tool of control over their politicians and then their group of celebrities. You know, I don't know anything about Bulgaria, but I'm sure it exists there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every other country. And so that's at least my guess. You think that, I mean, I guess if you had to guess, how many more that we don't know about are in America of these
I'm
ops?
sure. Yeah, I'm sure they'll be revealed and it'll become more obvious in time. I'm sure there's some that, you know, just aren't even talked about. But yeah, I think in general that's always how politicians have been controlled, through blackmail, through putting them in compromising situations and then recording them and using that, holding that over them. Sometimes I think they probably even seek out the criminals ahead of time and turn them into politicians. Like, I forget which serial killer it was, but one of them was like literally being groomed by his local political party to like run. He was going to be like a political rising star, and then he just like got caught for the serial killing ahead of time. And of course, a lot of those serial killers were also MK Ultra victims. It was basically a government operation during the like 70s era. But yeah, so I think in general, they have a movie, was it The Manchurian Candidate or something like that?
I don't know. I've heard of it, but I haven't. Don't know.
Yeah, it's basically MK Ultra, their politician, and he's like an empty husk, and they just they're able to make him do whatever they want, essentially.
So that's how I viewed Obama. Was like, they got this guy. You know, I think Hillary maybe. I don't know. Hillary seems like she's got some free will.
Well, yeah. Well, she also, her husband was on the Lolita Express 27 times, and you know, witnesses say he was at the island. In terms of Obama, though, what's crazy is like people don't talk about. We almost never talk about his family. One, because he was only raised by his white mother and grandparents, so that's like not a great story to put around about the first black president. But also that his mom and grandpa worked for the intelligence agencies. Yeah. They were like directly tied to CIA operations and stuff.
I heard a conspiracy. I don't know if you've heard about it or looked into it, but his stepfather was very, very, very rich of some sort, and it was tied into like a trust or something, and he inherited it. I saw it a long time ago somewhere. I don't know how accurate
Sounds
it is.
About right, yeah.
Sure, it does sound about right. I'm curious, in your opinion, how much of Trump is an op, and how much of that is him being him and chaos, and also at the same time him being influenced? Because you got to imagine, you become president, and immediately you're probably spoken to by some intelligence agencies and figures and individuals that we'll never know who they are, and maybe threatened in a certain way of like, hey, if you don't do X, Y, Z. You know, I remember when Rogan asked him that question. He was very like, it's good to be president or something like that. Like, what's it like? What's the first thing? And he kind of like maybe brushed over it a little bit.
Yeah.
How much of Trump do you think is an op versus him being him versus him trying to navigate a political situation but wanting to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it is completely just he's an op, which a lot of people do think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to tell because I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. And so many things, having looked into his family history more, like for instance, we were talking about how his uncle is like the main like deep state connection where, he's working directly with the FBI with Tesla documents, which if there was advanced technology that's being hidden in compartmentalized deep black projects in the, US military, they would have been in those FBI Tesla documents that were given to his uncle.
Mm-hmm.
But his uncle only went to MIT because Trump's immigrant dad, Fred, grinded up real estate deals during the Great Depression. He started his real estate career by literally building like a brick house by hand and like, I'm sure with his family or whatever, collaborating. And then he built like one of the first supermarkets where he built a building and then had all these different merchants come in and it was, offering all these different groceries and services and stuff like that.
And by the way, as we're saying this, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I respect the business empire and the business growth so much. For me, when I was getting started, that was inspiring. I read The Art of the Deal. I'm a teenager. I'm like, this is cool. I want to do stuff like this. You see the real estate build up, the small loan of $1 million, the whole thing.
Yeah.
That to me was always cool, and I respect that. And in my opinion, that was his hard work. It wasn't just something that was handed to him. And I think that's something to just mention is there is autonomy by a lot of these people. And it's not just like Trump was made to be Trump and we're not going to give him any credit. I think Trump became Trump on his own. And maybe there's influences or something as president. I'm not sure.
Trump is a bit of an enigma, which I think ultimately might go back to this same fact that his uncle got all of Tesla's research. This idea of Trump-Tesla time travel. This idea that, Tesla had some type of time travel technology and you have the crazy uncle scientist, John Trump, and his little nephew, Donald, and, they time travel and then they come back and Trump just basically, because of his knowledge in time travel, knows exactly how to become president against all odds. And that's that's shown in our primary in terms of time travel in talking about predictive programming. You have the Back to the Future movies are like the primary thing where it has that same motif. Crazy uncle, young kid, they do time travel, whatever. And the second movie of Back to the Future is literally the main antagonist, the bad guy, is actually based, Biff Tannen, I think is his name, is literally based off of Donald Trump. Basically, the bad guy finds the time machine. He's able to time travel. Or he might have just gotten the sports book where it tells you all the games ended, and I think he just used that to bet on all the sports games and become rich. But anyways, he builds like a casino. I think it's called like Biff's Pleasure Palace or something. And he's like dressed up as Trump, has the same like kind of like golden hair look to him. And yeah, the authors of the movie, the creators of the movies literally said, yeah, we based that character off of Trump.
The one that's always crazy to me is the Baron Trump's underground journey. And it's, what was it, written in the 1800s?
Yeah, so Ingersoll Lockwood wrote 2 books around the turn of the 20th century. So it was like 1898. He releases this, I think it was The Last President was 1898, but there's 2 books. Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey, and then you have The Last President. And both of them just have a bunch of characters that you would know. Baron Trump, just like I was saying before, where Elon's name in that other book, the Project Mars, it's not the name of the character, it's just the role is called Elon. In the same way, Baron Trump in Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey, he's just the Baron Trump. It's like a title. He's the Baron Trump. I guess it's still like the last name, essentially. But yeah, there's other characters in there. He has like a mentor called Don, which again is like he's the Don. His name, isn't necessarily just Don.
It's just wild that actually exists. That you're telling me, and I know this already, but you're saying it now for the audience, and people know this, but there is a book written in 1898 called The Last President, and another one, Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey.
Yep.
And it's about a person named Baron Trump with the last president, and his mentor is Don. It's just like that exists.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be fair, the two books are two separate, cinematic universes or whatever.
Fair enough.
But the fact that they're same author released, in succession to each other is crazy.
It's wild. And then you have a president named Don, Baron Trump, and then he also wrote a book called The Last President.
Yeah, and The Last President, there's like, it goes even beyond. They have a Pence character. They have the president who's elected, the last president, is like part of the upper class, but he's managed to win the hearts of the common man. So it's basically describing Trump. And he he lives on Fifth Avenue in New York, which is where Trump Tower is. So yeah, crazy coincidences. And I think Last President is especially, in terms of the predictive programming and the timeline I see playing out, I do see Trump as the last president as we transition from this republic into a technocratic empire, which you can start to see.
Before we go there,
yeah,
how much of Trump and this current setup is an op versus organic, and him actually winning and being here? Like,
so I think Trump, like I said, is an enigma because his dad, it seemed organic that his dad, through those real estate deals like I was talking about, he paid for John Trump, his brother, to go to MIT. He wouldn't have gone if Fred Trump hadn't have grinded up the real estate. And then I listened to the whole audiobook of Art of the Deal, and listening to the way that he was able to finesse the news media and the local government in order to get tax breaks and get the construction companies to help him, for instance, one of his first big public events was he got this Central Park ice skating arena, which is still around. He got it built when the city had taken it was 5 years over, late and way over budget. They had to keep redoing stuff. He leveraged the media against the local government and was like, I'll build it and under budget and ahead of schedule. And then construction company comes and helps him out do it. So he has some brilliance in terms of the fandangling. He did that with all of his projects where he'd leverage the government against themselves and able to get tax breaks by applying pressure with the media. So there's genius there and true finesse. So, it could be that he's that he has more, if he was exposed to this time travel technology, which, to go in deeper to it, the only descriptions we have of a time travel like technology as far as leaks and declassified government programs, etc., is we have a description from Bob Lazar, who's on Joe Rogan. Bob Lazar claims to have worked at Area 51 and worked on reproducing alien craft and technology. And he talks about there being this Project Looking Glass technology, essentially. I think Project Looking Glass might be separate, but Bob Lazar describes this alien technology where you sit in a chair and telepathically there's some type of neural interface where you can see future timelines, which aren't necessarily 100% going to happen, but you can see them. And this is also in the Marvel Universe, literally. In Endgame, Infinity War, they lose. But they have Doctor Strange, the wizard character. He basically looks through, using this time stone, he was able to look through all these possible timelines. And he's like, there's only one where we win. And the one where they win is they have to lose first, then use time travel to get all these Infinity Stones and basically set back time in order to stop the depopulation plot, in which Captain America and Iron Man, Trump and Elon end up winning and foiling the plot of the Bill Gates Thanos character. But so anyways, this is so much, conjecture as far as what's the reality, because it's so hard to tell what's the reality of how much is chaos and how much is order.
Sure.
This is, just one of the possible aspects in terms of Trump, because it is so hard. There is so much of what he's done that is, so organic, where he faces clear opposition with the Clintons. When Hillary lost, she didn't give a concession speech that night because she was so surprised. It took her, so by surprise. She didn't even have a concession speech written. If everything was scripted, then she would have, at least came out and said something. It wouldn't have been like a huge thing. But, in terms of Trump, how much is, legit versus set up? Like I said, there are some things in the past, like the last president or whatever, that gives the layup, and you have, of course, the John Trump connection. But yeah, it's hard to tell. I think ultimately, like, the way that things are playing out is it aligns perfectly with all this predictive programming. So it'd be crazy if it wasn't. But I think maybe I don't know. I think he kind of has like he might have a direct hand in the script playing out himself. Like I said, if he had access to this kind of literal predictive technology that could see all these timelines, so he knew exactly the 4D chess meme would be accurate if he could, if he had access to this technology through his uncle, which is a possibility, then he would know how to play things out. So he would be directly influencing what's going on.
So what do you think happens next? What's the big prediction of everything that's going on? What do you think happens from here? You've talked about the riots.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked about, I'll let you list them, but there's a lot of things you've talked about. I've been reading your tweets recently, and I'm like, yeah, he did. Yeah, I remember reading that. Oh, yeah, this one. Just checking them off recently.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on your actual predictions, they're coming true. What's your next prediction? What happens next?
Yeah. So,
where does this thing end?
Mm-hmm. So to transition us, like I said, there's things like, the specific questions: who exactly is they? Who exactly is how much chaos? How much order? I wouldn't, I'm not staking. I really can't say. So I'm not that's not really my focus. What I focus on is, regardless of all those things, I know what's going to happen, or rather, I can predict with some accuracy, and you can see this in my past work, where, for instance, in October of 2019, before anybody even said the word corona, and before the first patient zero even came about, a month earlier, I have a tweet where I say, imagine a world with 100% vaccination rate for schools, travel, blah, blah, blah. I said, that's coming. And yeah, anyway, so it was a month early, and I was tipped off because of how much conditioning they were doing to the public that year for the flu vaccine. So right before they run this big op, they were conditioning everybody. So I was able to predict it. In general, though, I can't say who exactly is pulling the strings or how much is order, how much is chaos, but I have a good picture with a good track record of what's going to happen. So what you were talking about as far as checking things off the list, I made a tweet in 2023, which had a list of future events. And in that, it basically says exactly what I just explained, is that I don't know what order these things are going to happen. I don't know which of these events are going to cause the other events, which events are going to be together, that are going to be like a combo thing. But I know that these are the things that have been put into the mass subconscious through the media and through government operations. Like, for instance, with the pandemic, 2 weeks after I had made that tweet about mandatory vaccination, they ran Event 201, which was a global coronavirus simulation
Sponsored by Bill Gates.
funded by Bill Gates and John Hopkins. And you can watch, they have actual videos of the simulation where they talk about conspiracy theorists. They talk about how to censor the media to get these conspiracy theorists away. People saying it's a bioweapon, how to counter that. Which, of course, is all those things, too, were also in a 2011 movie, Contagion, which was revealed through a Freedom of Information Act request that the CDC had created to the tune of $1.5 million. They created a separate agency in order to influence the script of that movie. So, yeah, anyways, what's coming next, I have this list of these events, and that have started to get checked off pretty rapidly. And on that list, one of the ones that like really got people's attention recently was in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is, for all intents and purposes, the primary mythology of American mainstream culture. So all civilizations have a primary mythology, whether it be, the kings of Europe ruled by divine right. They're using the Bible in order to, they gain their right to rule by the authority of Jesus and God, etc., which, of course, the Holy Catholic, Holy Roman Empire, same thing, Pope rules by, he's the vicar of Christ, representation of Christ on earth. You look in the past, you have the Egyptians, they had a pantheon of gods. The pharaohs were seen as, first as Ra, as a physical embodiment of the sun god Ra, and then later seen as Horus in life and Osiris in death. So again, they, all civilizations, the core that keeps them all together is a primary mythology of the culture. And that's the glue that holds them together. In America, the most well-known stories and universes and characters, archetypes, come from the Marvel universe, effectively. And there's Marvel and DC and whatever.
It's crazy that that's the case.
But they're the same archetypes, and it's multi-generational too. They basically started these characters with the World War II generation. For instance, the Captain America comic books, like the idea of punching Nazis. There's a comic book panel of Captain America literally punching Hitler, and that was used to galvanize the public against the Nazis. And yeah, so anyways, that's the Marvel. And Stan Lee was, he's like seen as the primary. He was the one who created Spider-Man and Iron Man, and he was like basically the face. He was the patriarch of the Marvel universe, and in all the movies, he was in every one. I think he died right before Endgame, but he had cameos in all of them. And he was, in World War II, one of 9 people hired as a playwright for the U.S. Army, which was essentially a propagandist, creating media to help the war effort. Regardless, that we could go on forever. Obviously, that the programming in the end in the Avengers is to, again, technocracy, where in the movies the superheroes become more powerful than all the governments. So the governments are basically at the will of, things happen at the will of these superheroes, of the Iron Mans, the Captain Americas. In the Marvel universe, after the first, so they had all these individual movies for Hulk and Captain America and Iron Man, all individual movies. The first time they made a movie where they all came together was the first Avengers movie, where they all get together in New York to stop the alien invasion, which is literally the Trump Madison Square Garden event to stop the illegal alien invasion. But after that, in the universe,
Oh, because they had all the characters there for that event.
They assembled it, and you could see it manifest in the media. I had been talking about this since 2022.
They say Avengers.
Yeah, they literally say the MAGA Avengers. So, and I had been talking about this again since 2022. My second book cover, which I'm still working on, is literally Trump as Captain America, Kanye as Black Panther, and Elon Musk as Iron Man. So the fact that that happened years after what I had already been talking about, at least 2 years after I had identified that this was the timeline, was crazy. But the next thing after the first Marvel movie, first Avengers movie, where they all get together, the next like major conflict within that group, once they're united, is called Captain America: Civil War. So there's a movie where Iron Man and Captain America have a disagreement that splits the Avengers down the middle, and they have like this movie where they're in conflict, and eventually it resolves, and they work together again in the future. But you can see right now, this is the main tweet that that alerted people, or that got people interested in my work again, was I'd been predicting this forever, even before Trump and Elon were even working together. Originally, they were already opposed to each other. The only people forget, but Elon wasn't even supporting Trump up until the assassination attempt. After the assassination attempt on Trump, that's the only time Elon actually publicly supported
How organic
Trump.
do you think that was?
The assassination attempt?
Oh, the support from Elon afterwards.
Oh, I mean, it was always going to happen. Like, that was clearly in terms of his family's goal of creating a technocracy. Of course, you're always going to eventually weigh in.
A lot of it is Elon marketing that, in your opinion. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is he's marketing, I'm here to save America. It's all about freedom. We need the free speech on Twitter, da 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 da. Mm-hmm. But all it does is further his goal of technocracy and his family's goal of technocracy. And even
things like, don't get me wrong, I love the fact that he bought Twitter, and I can say whatever I want on there basically with very little restraints compared to the old leadership. But at the same time, even that is kind of an op where he wants to turn X into the everything app, where he's basing it off of the Chinese WeChat app, where basically you have all your messaging, all your money, and it's basically a digital ID where if the government really wanted to, they could just cut you off, and then you'd be your whole digital life in one swoop would be completely destroyed, and you would be, neutered as a human.
So is that, in your predictions, is that going to happen, or do the good guys win?
So the good guys win, but at the same time, you can see it right now where Palantir, which of course Palantir is a Peter Thiel product. Peter Thiel was part of the PayPal mafia, where Elon really made his money. Originally it was called X.com. He merged with the people of PayPal. They created PayPal, which again, he wanted to call it was originally X.com is what he fused. It was a payment processor that kind of got merged with PayPal. And through PayPal, when they sold PayPal, it created all these super wealthy tech bros, Peter Thiel included, and they call it the PayPal Mafia in the Silicon Valley VC space because they're basically the kingmakers. If you go to the PayPal Mafia parties, you meet one of them, and they like your project, they'll fund you, and then boom, you're a unicorn. You can make $1 bajillion just like that. And that's kind of what happened to Vance, was hired by Peter Thiel. So he has direct, PayPal Mafia ties. I guess to spin it around, though, Palantir, Trump just let Palantir, Palantir's purpose was to collect as much public data as possible and connect it all to, individuals. And now Trump has allowed Palantir into the government to combine their public database with the private government databases of anything, taxes and Social Security and stuff like that, to create a universal ultra database, which God only knows what they're going to do with that. Probably they're going to use it to hunt down protesters and illegal immigrants, which is what immediately happened as soon as they approved the Palantir thing. Then we had the LA riots right after. So that's an example where it's the good guys are winning, but the technocracy is still being implemented.
The only way I see people on our side accepting, let's say, a digital ID or the vaccine, for example, or a chip, is that it's presented by someone they trust, aka Trump.
Yeah.
And that's my concern with it, which is no matter who's in there, you might trust Trump, whatever, the whole thing. No matter who's in there, the agenda is going forward of there is totalitarian control in a tech way, as you say, technocracy, being implemented in real time.
Yeah.
Even though our guy won.
Yeah.
Is the reality that, I know you said in Avengers, the guys time travel and then they win.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do we win here? Or do we win, but there is technocracy, totalitarian control, and there is control of the population?
Yeah. Yeah. No, ultimately, it's just kind of a foregone conclusion of an increasingly technological society. You're going to end up like that regardless if, taking things to the logical conclusion. And we're already, Palantir integrating with the government is one thing. But, we already have so much of our data is being stolen at all times. It's not like it's a slow transition with all these things. But yeah, I mean, on paper, the good guys win, but it ends up ultimately in a one world technocratic transhumanist society. And, you could blackpill about that, but in reality, for the people who are smart enough to know what's coming, we can avoid the pitfalls. So the two examples I always bring up is Bitcoin and the vaccine. So you knew if you were tied into conspiracy theory realms and knew the truth about big pharma, and stuff like that, and then the Federal Reserve, then you would know to buy Bitcoin before it was 100K, and even now, still a good idea to buy it. And then you'd know to avoid the vaccine. So your finances and your health, just by knowing those two things, you're already in the upper echelon of society, and you get a free pass to freedom, while everybody else, unfortunately, has to suffer a rapidly hyperinflating society with degrading health
with blood clots.
God only knows. Yeah, God only knows what's going to happen later as a result. But yeah, I mean, ultimately on the outside, yeah, we're gonna go to a technocratic one world government that's transhumanist in nature. But as long as you have your shit figured out and you don't plug into Neuralink, because you have some concept of the divine spark in humanity and like our worth as human beings created in God's image. If you have that knowledge, then you will never, then you wouldn't plug into a.
I don't want the
virtual
chip.
reality.
I don't want the chip personally. But how do you reconcile with the people that do get it, do become infinitely more powerful in this realm, and can simply outcompete you with that level of information accessible in a second? Because right now we have the GPT. You have access to the phone. But imagine if it's right in here and you think of it and it happens. How do you compete against that if you don't take it?
Yeah, I don't think life's a competition like that. I think there's a lot of abundance, and there's always some way to get what you need. And in terms of people will become very powerful by doing that.
Well, I mean, let's take someone that works a normal job.
Yeah.
What if everybody has the chip but they don't? How do they compete in that workforce? In
these, in the future timeline, there's at the same time that it becomes kind of dark in terms of all the data and like the control and the possible censorship and negative connotations of that apparatus. At the same time, we're going to have increasing abundance as well because of the technology, and AI is going to be able to do everything for us. So the cost of creating things is going to go extremely low. And people have already talked about this like universal basic income idea, which again is not, optimally, it's not how you'd run a society. There's so many negative consequences of just feeding a population, making them relying on the government to send them the paycheck.
Well, then it makes sense why they want to depopulate, because it's like, if you're just feeding a population, then why?
And actually, if which I think is probably the truth, if there's advanced technology and health and life extension technologies already existing, you can't release that to the public without first depopulating. Because if you release technology that lets everybody live to 200 years old, but you didn't already depopulate and sterilize everybody else, which You can look, it's not even a conspiracy, just look at the actual documented, sperm counts of men.
Yeah.
It's already plummeting. So you're already like halfway there. You would have to get to this advanced technology and release it, you would already have to depopulate the earth, and that's already cooked into all the programming.
To go even deeper on that, it's almost like they give you these negative choices. They, whatever, the op as a whole gives you these negative choices, and if you do not succumb and choose the negative, you gain the ability to have the access to the new technologies because you and your bloodline isn't sterilized and is going to stay forever. But those of you that took the vaccine and aren't going to have more kids or are going to die off earlier are obviously not going to have the access to it. In a way, because I've gone down some of these rabbit holes, in a way, they usually like to, in terms of what I've seen, and you correct me if I'm wrong because you're way deeper than I am, but they usually like to provide a choice.
Well, they have to.
And to keep their karmic, debt free and clear, but they have to provide a choice, and then it's up to you to choose. And if you pass the test, you're almost the person capable of the reward of this new society. Do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, 100%. That's spot on what's happening. And the word Satan, the word literally just means the opposition. So all these things really, if you're trying to like hardline things and look at things, try to quantify everything that I'm talking about, it makes no sense because you can't figure out who's the they pulling the strings, how much is order, how much is chaos. It only makes sense if you look at it through a spiritual lens, like you're talking about, where there are these occult karmic laws, which of course is the reality of the situation. There's practices, there's Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, there's teachings within Freemasonry about spirituality and kind of laws like that, because it's also based off Kabbalah. But there's Hermeticism, which again is kind of, all these things are basically the same. But there are these laws of the universe that have to be observed. And in terms of what you were just talking about, there has to be an option. Yeah, they can only do to you what you consent to. So even though the vaccine was, for instance, whether or not that vaccine ends up being the one that has super crazy negative long-term effects, which I think there is some, as we get further on, there is more and more data showing certain things, like the health of a placenta in a vaccinated woman versus non, and of course the heart inflammation in men. There are some things that could possibly, manifest into long-term negative effects, but whether or not it's that one, in that situation, even in the most high-pressure situation, all they could do is apply peer pressure, threaten your job, and stuff like that. You always still would have the possibility of saying no. You could always opt out, even though they applied maximum pressure. And then if you did opt out, they actually couldn't even punish you for that long, because now everything's back to normal. You'll be perfectly fine. All you could do is, you might have gotten fired. A lot of them got rehired. A lot of nurses and stuff like that, for instance, got rehired afterwards. So yeah, there is always a choice in terms of the karmic thing. And this kind of gets into the question of where people are like, why would they put stuff in the movies? Like, why would they do 9/11 predictive programming beforehand? Why would they tell you, with the Contagion movie, what they're going to do? Why did the CDC fund a movie about it? And yeah, it's like a karmic law where if you present something, and they actually talk about this exact concept in the Kabbalion, which is actually, it's a book about Hermeticism.
I'm familiar.
They talk about there being two planes, the conscious and the subconscious plane. And they talk about karma like a pendulum swing. So if you were to hurt somebody, you'd be pushing the pendulum, you hurt them. And then, but eventually you're going to get hit by the backswing karmic effects. But there being two planes, the conscious and the subconscious, if you push the pendulum on the subconscious plane and put in this predictive programming with movies like Contagion, where people are already comfortable with this idea of a pandemic, they're already familiar with the idea that there's going to be conspiracy theorists that are going to say it's a lab leak.
And that's a thing in general. This is a thing that can happen in general.
Yes. Yeah. So if you push that on the subconscious plane, then when you do it in real life, they're already primed for it. So there's no backswing. The backswing is, it doesn't manifest because it doesn't even occur to them that there is something suspicious about this. They never look into it because they already know in their head, their subconscious doesn't know the difference between fiction and reality. And they're just like, oh, it's probably just like in the movies, how there's conspiracy theorists that say it's made in the Wuhan lab and, that don't want to take the vaccine and stuff like that.
It's also why the health, the fitness, the spiritual health as well is so important. Because when you have that, you can spot these things and decipher truth from fiction and say, I don't know, something's off here. Why are they locking everything down? Why are they giving us a vaccine? You can question these things when you can think clearly. But I don't think people can think clearly because we talk about the vaccines. We talk about the stuff in the food. We talk about the stuff in the water. We talk about the slop that people watch on the internet. They're dumbed down.
Yeah, it's full spectrum warfare. You're getting hit from all sides. And when you learn about all these things, it's almost amazing how resilient the human body is, that we can even survive under, fluorinated and chlorinated water and, smog in the skies and glyphosate in the food.
It also makes you question what the lifespan would be right now today without any other technology if you removed all of that shit. At least I question it often.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said about
Something I want to mention for you as well, dude. Bro, more media, more video. Because, I'm super big on it because that's what I do all day. But there's an element to it of we can create our own propaganda, which is what we're doing right now. And you with a Rumble show or something like that, going like a Nick Fuentes arc, a little bit.
Yeah.
Dude, I feel like you would crush it. I don't know what you're waiting for.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to. Like we were talking about before the show, I want to start doing some regular live streams. And then the AI clipping now is ridiculous. I don't know if you've experimented with any of the tools.
A little bit.
I was using one called Flowgen in 2023, and it was already pretty decent. I'm sure now it's got to be amazing. So I gotta tap back into that. But yeah, I want to do some live streams, do a daily news, esoteric news update, and then run it through some AI clipping and spread that everywhere. But this podcast definitely inspired me. I'm gonna go home and do it.
We need more media, brother. We need more media. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you think is something that I would be interested in, or the people that are like me would be interested in, and that we should talk about while you're here?
I guess in terms of ultimately what's coming next, we went really deep on a bunch of things. I guess in general, on that list that we were talking about, the list I made in 2023, other things that are on the list that will be manifesting next. We had the Civil War thing, like we talked about, the Elon and Trump. It was almost like that was the starting gunshot of the rest of them, because so many things have cascaded into that.
Yeah.
So you had the initial split. Musk says Trump's on the Epstein list, throws a fit. Everyone's like, oh my God, they're breaking up. Now we have that split still furthering with the Iran war, which is starting another war, is definitely against the overall MAGA thesis. So for instance, they've cut out Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, one of the Avengers that he assembled. She's basically getting cut out of all the national security meetings.
And by the way, a war that we don't need to be involved in at all. If we're attacked, I'm all for it. Let's go to war. If someone bombs one of our cities, but come on.
Don't worry. So that goes into the next thing is on that list of things. So that was kind of the gunshot. Then that immediately went into illegal immigration based BLM style riots. Where, like I was talking about before, where we had the 9/11 phase, then we had the BLM phase.
Yeah.
Now we're moving into BLM's basically the brand is tarnished. It's done. They can't leverage it anymore. It's now become buy large mansions is what everybody thinks of because of the corruption in the organization. That's over. Now to get people to riot and in the streets, they're going to be using the mass deportations as the reasoning. And there's this thing in the mass subconscious right now, this idea of a civil war. Because of, like you said, the division is so high between left and right now, it's definitely accelerated. People are like, okay, the logical conclusion is there needs to be something that happens, a conflict, a civil war, whatever that may look like, as a result. So they literally came out with the movie Civil War in 2024 during election season. But what I think what it's going to actually manifest, what it'll actually look like, is more like the final Purge movie, where all the previous Purge movies were very BLM style. It was mostly like racial and class warfare like that. In the final Purge movie, called the Forever Purge, the Trump party, which is pretty clearly what it's the right-wing conservative party that started the Purge. They lost power in the 2016 movie Purge election year, where the Hillary Clinton character won. But then, so the Purge ends, and the final movie, the Trump party gets back in power, and the Purge begins again, aka 2020 Purge riots. Trump loses, Blue Party is in. 2024, Trump gets back in, and now the Purge starts again. And this movie, Forever Purge, all the other movies, like I said, very like black versus white. This one is illegal immigrants versus, wealthy Texan ranchers. And in this movie, they don't just have single nights where the rest of the movies are based off this idea that you have one night where all crime is legal. In the Forever Purge, the Purge sirens go off in the morning. Everything's supposed to stop, but the people don't stop. They just keep killing each other, etc., etc. And you can see this where the BLM riots, where you had one specific martyr, there would be some type of police event in the city. That would be the reason that everybody would riot. But since we have all these high school kids that grew up during the pandemic and have already been conditioned to this idea, even before they were rioting for mass deportations, they're already doing teen takeovers of malls where they would just all meet there and raid all the stores because nobody could control it. They just realized if we have a bunch of people in an area all working together to commit crime, then they can't stop all of us. So now, with the mass deportations, they don't need a martyr anymore, and they can be created at a moment's notice, this complete anarchy. And then you tie in this new assassination culture that we're building in the U.S., where you have the United Healthcare CEO that gets shot in the streets, and then the left is like celebrating it, and like all their influencers are like, oh, this is, whatever. It's too bad he got killed, but it's not a big deal or whatever. Now, all of a sudden, now you have somebody, a deranged right-wing guy who just, on the No Kings protest, Trump's birthday, etc., he goes and assassinates those two Minnesotan, I think it was like 3
Was that
people.
right? I thought it was Tim Walz' guy.
He was appointed by Tim Walz, but what's come out now is it does look like he was like an actual right-wing conservative guy. He was just appointed by Tim Walz. It would have been a better narrative. I mean, I would have personally, it would have fit my bias if it was another leftoid. But it does seem to be like he was actually like a conservative right-wing guy. But that just shows you have a left-wing assassination. Now you got a right-wing assassination. Yeah. And he even dressed up in like the Purge mask, like in those video cameras, looks straight out of the Purge movies. He was in that mask. And it just goes to show you that is the culture we're going to, this complete lawlessness where the police are going to be overwhelmed. Yeah. And there'll be these times of chaos.
Do you think it gets cleaned up? Do you think we end up clearing out the illegals?
A lot of it. In the Purge movies, the final Purge movie, the wall ends up keeping people in. That's what because of how much chaos, people want to go to Mexico, but the wall is keeping everybody in.
Got it.
I don't think the thing about these predictive programming events in the movies, they always present a fear porn scenario. So with Contagion, the disease,
it's always way worse.
The disease was way worse. Yeah, in there, everybody died, whatever, and the vaccine was actually really effective. For 9/11, you had one terror attack. Everybody thought, oh my God, now we're going to have something like this all the time. That's why we need to have the Patriot Act or whatever. In reality, it just happened. A couple thousand people died, but that was essentially the extent of it. It's a quick thing, quick recovery, but then the response, the problem, reaction, the solution is what lasts a long time.
Because all they care about is the response. All they care about is the solution.
Yeah,
once
and they don't want extended chaos. So what's building now? They'll build up for a while till people beg for the solution. So we are going to have the Purge forever scenario. Things are going to escalate to the point where people beg for a Palantir police state, where you can immediately track down if a rioter loots a store. Even if you just get a little bit of videotape of their face or something, or track their phone.
They'll get rid of a decent amount of illegals, but it will bring in more of a police state on average Americans.
Yep, which you can already see it with the Real ID. This has been in work for a long time, where now they have a chip system where if you go to the airport, boom, it's there's a central database where you got your chip gets, clipped, and they now have like they're tracking where you're traveling, etc. But on the other side, now there's less illegals, which again is they do the pendulum swing. They have Trump in office. They have Biden in office. Biden lets in 12 million illegals at the minimum. Swings the pendulum. Trump comes in. He swings it the other way. And on both sides, they are, they're ultimately profiting off of the solution. So that Purge Forever scenario, that's in play. What comes next, like you said, I don't want to go to war with Iran unless they attack us. What's coming and
false flag?
Well, and what's been on that same list of things.
USS Liberty?
Yeah, could be. There could be something like that. But what seems to be pointed to right now and was on my list of predictions, and I think we actually talked about it in our last podcast in 2022, is cyber polygon, a massive cyber attack. And there was just a tweet yesterday from a news organization that said, like, CIA officials say to expect a major cyber attack from Iran within the next, coming weeks.
Actually from Iran?
Well, that's the other thing is they, in another one of the WikiLeaks called Vault 7, which was a leak of CIA documents, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, but one of the major ones was this concept that you can plant digital fingerprints and blame whatever country you want for any digital action. So they could run it themselves, say it was Iran, use that as the, reason to strike. So I think that's also in the cards. They also refer to that as a cyber pandemic, like whatever that guy's name is, Schwab. He was the leader of the WEF, Klaus Schwab.
Yeah.
He literally is on tape being like, "Oh yes, the cyber pandemic," blah blah blah. So that's also in the cards. That's gonna happen sometime soon, and it'll probably be a thing where it's like escalating, where it'll start with, and you can kind of see they've been pump faking it. Yeah, like they did it the other day where the only thing up was X, essentially. But they always do that. Like before the pandemic, they did the 2009 swine flu, which was a big nothing burger, but they still managed to get a vaccine made and like distributed through the World Health Organization. So they do little pump fakes like that to get you primed. And I think we're now going into, with all these cyber outages, like you just talked about, like last week, they never come out with a reason. They never like actually say anything. The biggest one, so like I talked about Event 201, where they did the global coronavirus simulation, they've been doing this one called Cyber Polygon, where they simulate a global cyber attack. And they did it in 2022. Then in 2023, on the same day that they were running the event, they did what I think was a live run in Canada. Canada had one of its biggest internet outages and like electronic service outages, where their major carrier, Rogers, which also was handling all of the like digital payment processing, just went out for the day. And we have a de-cashified civilization, a no cash digital like payment civilization. Canada's even worse. So people couldn't get gas. Mobilized half the country. There was, luckily it was only for like a day, but there was a fair amount of chaos and inconvenience. So you can imagine what would happen with an extended. They didn't have to take out the power. All they did was or take down the services. One of the core service providers. So, anyways, they ran that on the exact same day that they ran the Cyber Polygon simulation. So,
I've got another question for you. So that's what's next in our near future.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I can see it. Are you familiar with the theory that the poles are going to shift and flip? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you are.
Yep.
What do you know about it? What do you think about it?
That's really a wild card in my overall, overarching timeline. And I have in my book I wrote about it. You can when you read it, you'll see what my thoughts were in 2019. But it is actually happening. You can see it's a documented thing. The poles are moving. The north and at least I think the North Pole is the one that's really been tracked as moving pretty rapidly. And there is historically documented times that the magnetic pole shifted, and there's a couple of competing theories where it's like, does it happen really slowly over 600,000 years, or does it happen, or is it like an exponential curve where it starts off slow, but then you just hit a peak? Or I guess the better example would be like falling off a cliff, where it just goes super rapidly all at once you hit a climactic point. I think that's probably the more likely scenario in terms of predictive programming. Roland Emmerich, who wrote Independence Day, Stargate, and then he wrote 2012, which came out, and I think in 2011, 2012, and it was about this cataclysmic event, this idea of the pole shifting, and Earth crust displacement theory, I think was like the official one, and I think it was it Charles Hapgood who came up with that? And his book on it like had a foreword by Albert Einstein. So it was like a fairly talked about thing in the past. In the movie though, they have this, they have this major cataclysmic event. At the beginning of the movie, they have a whistleblower who's about to go public about where all this missing money from the government budget went, which of course the Pentagon's failed audits. Trump started for the first time in 2018, tried to do an audit. And they just said, oh, we failed. Every time they've tried it since. And it's of course never undergone a proper one. Estimates from, there's a Michigan State professor who did a little research project and made some estimates based off of publicly available information. And in 2018, the estimate was 21 trillion missing from the Pentagon budget. The day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld went on TV, September 10th, and said there's 2.3 trillion missing from the budget. And then, of course, the next day, the accounting department of the Pentagon was blown up, hit by a plane.
Blown up for sure.
So in the movie, though, the government whistleblower is about to come out. They kill him, which was like kind of a weird, like brutal way to start the movie. But they talk about ships. They talk about, oh, there's a cataclysm coming, but we have ships, so we got to get to the ships. And the whole time they make you think spaceships. And they think, oh, all the government money, and this is kind of the narrative that's right now, is all this secret Pentagon money is going to anti-gravitic craft, spaceships, etc. Secret space program is basically what all these whistleblowers and UFO conspiracy theorists are saying, which I think there is some truth to that. I do think we have some anti-gravitic craft. But in the movie, at least, they lead you in that direction, and then at the end you find out that they were creating like ships, like Noah's Ark type shit.
Yeah.
And that's what they end up using to survive the pole shift cataclysm.
So, a theory of mine, and I've seen other people sort of talk about it, is part of the depopulation agenda and the basically presenting these negative things to kill off the weak links or the people that choose wrong, is to then have the smaller society with less people and the smartest people that survive the negative choice, and then bringing them into a civilization that survives the cataclysm, and all the tech is being built and to survive the cataclysm, and the AI and the robots are there to act as the servants that serve this new class of people post cataclysm. Is there any validity in that, in your opinion? Do you think that's accurate, not accurate? I personally think that a pole shift is coming, and I think it's exponential. That's intuitively what I believe to be reality. Obviously not now, probably 50 years or years, whatever. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think that's, out of all the ways that things could play out, that's the most reasonable. And that gets to another core question is, with all these things that are predictable and these events that seem orchestrated, it's like, are these people good or evil? Are they doing these things? You know, you assume evil right off the bat because they are doing a bunch of horrible shit. But in reality, it's like a lot of it, like we talked about, is like inevitable. If you just take technology to a logical conclusion, you're going to get to the same place regardless of intentions. And Trump, or Elon, even talks about that in terms of Neuralink. He's like, well, you know, we've created AI, which of course he helped create that. Now we need to compete with them, so we need to have Neuralink to compete. But yeah, ultimately it's like things that seem bad will, you know, it's possible there's intentions involved that will actually be beneficial in the future, like this depopulation, both from psychological and cultural standpoint, as well as the medical and pharmacological, you know, warfare they're perpetrating on us. It could, you know, like we talked about earlier, if you do have advanced health technology and life extension, you would need to depopulate first in order to not have a completely overpopulated world. And if you are going to have like a really crazy magnetic pole shift, then you would also want to depopulate. That way you could, there would be less panic and you'd be able to save more of the people, whether that be putting them in deep underground bases or, you know, in terms of the movie, getting more people onto the ships. So there would be, you know, less chaos in that situation, which, you know, it does seem like a possibility. And that the idea of a major depopulation event, of course, that's the theme of the entire Marvel Endgame, the 22 movies ending in Endgame. They, you know, Thanos snaps his fingers and wipes out half of the
I feel like so many movies
population.
in general, too. Just like these massive cataclysms, you're almost expecting it. I feel like it's in the subconscious here. Like, at least in America, we're almost expecting something massive to like one day happen that wipes out everything. You look at like, what's that movie The Rock was in? San Andreas, where the whole thing just like goes nuts and there's.
Oh, is that like what? I haven't watched the movie, but is there like does
like
California split off?
It just like falls
US?
into the ocean or something. I've only seen the clips of it, or like The Day After Tomorrow, where the big storm comes, like the Ice Age. Obviously, the one you spoke about, Independence Day. It feels like that is probably one of the biggest things programmed. If we're talking about predictive programming, you mentioned it in Marvel, there's going to be a big depopulation, cataclysm, apocalyptic event coming one day.
Yeah, it's something that I haven't, you know, I haven't really integrated too well in the timeline. It's hard to tell exactly what that will play out like, or, you know, if it's going to be a reality, because you could have a pole shift that doesn't create like a crazy flood, and that could just be another
Sure.
fear porn scenario, like we talked about with Contagion. And Independence Day is another one where they have, oh, there's aliens, but they're here to kill us. In reality, in my viewpoint, as far as, and that's another thing that I've been tweeting about is we're soon going to have some of this anti-gravitic craft and alien UFO stuff become much more public. Last year we had
I saw you talk about that.
The first public government hearing from government whistleblowers about secret space program / UFO technology.
What was the whole drones thing? Do you know what that was?
That really, the New Jersey drones, no idea. What it seemed like was that they were just scanning for some type of nuclear material was one of the best ideas that I saw. I really couldn't say. But yeah.
Sorry to derail you.
No, that's a good one. It's just like another thing that Trump came in, said he was going to figure out and tell us and didn't do yet. But yeah, so UFOs are next. And ultimately, in terms of the timeline, in all these movies, basically, in order to get the world, because basically every civilization since the beginning of time wants to form a one world government. They want to take over everything. Napoleon, Hitler, Alexander the Great. They want to unite the whole world under their empire, and it hasn't been possible before technology. What they've been continuously talking about since World War II is this idea that if you, again, create an enemy outside of the normal conflict, the normal realm, if we're threatened by an outside force, an alien force, then we would all unite against it and form a one world government. And that is, Ronald Reagan said that in a speech, and I believe to the United Nations, which is like super creepy. And then Bill Clinton repeated basically the exact same speech when he was asked about aliens on, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel, where he literally verbatim, imagine a world where we were threatened by an outside force, how quickly all of our issues, all of our problems with each other would fade away. And in these movies, all these predictive programming stuff, like for instance, The Watchmen, which is another comic book by Alan Moore, it's basically like an Avengers scenario where, again, he has a league of superheroes. He's Dr. Manhattan, the main one, like the Iron Man equivalent, happens to hang out on Mars, and he was also solely responsible for the shift to electric cars in that universe. Basically, it's like a Cold War scenario, and they prevent nuclear war by faking an alien invasion. And by faking the alien invasion, they prevent the nuclear war. Again, I think that's slightly different than what's actually going to happen, because in there they do kill, like the alien invasion kills a bunch of people in New York. What I think is in reality is going to happen is we continue these nuclear tensions. There's going to be some more, bloodshed. They might, let off a nuke bomb or whatever. But regardless, whenever we hit the point where people are begging for order, that's when they bring in the UFOs and, disable all the nukes and prevent us from killing ourselves. And that is in terms of, because there's been tons of UFO sightings, the only time that UFOs have done anything to a military base, like a direct conflict, was disabling a nuclear missile silo. That's like the only documented case of them doing anything. And I think that's probably going to be...
Now, is it aliens, or is it our government masquerading as aliens?
Yeah, it's the deep state, this breakaway civilization that has all this advanced technology, that has been digging the deep underground bases and taking all this Pentagon money and somehow getting away with it.
Almost alien to what we know as reality.
Mm-hmm. No doubt, genetically modifying themselves. They probably look completely different. They're probably just straight Ubermensch type stuff. And that is actually some of the few recorded alien abductions and interactions. A lot of them are like... they're like, oh yeah, they're super tall and blonde. And it's like, there's the whole side theory about UFOs, Nazis creating anti-gravitic craft around the same time and going missing and doing, of course, they had genetic modification programs and stuff like that. So That, and of course, we talked about Trump's uncle getting all the Tesla technology, which they hid within the government and they took immediately as soon as he died. So yeah, it's just going to be like a formalization of that deep state, advanced technological deep state's always controlled everything, but they're going to present to us, they've already conditioned in the media, this idea, because the only reason when we see UFOs that we think it's from outer space, the only reason is because of the media. Yeah. Without the media, we would say, yo, who made that? Somebody made that. Like, somebody made some advanced shit. Right. And the only reason we don't is because right at that turn post-World War II, where we had our first sightings, the Foo Fighters, the term Foo Fighters, or the name of the band, Foo Fighters was a term to refer to unidentified flying objects over the battlefield in Europe in World War II. So they already had a bunch of sightings of these anti-gravitic craft in World War II, but afterwards they started to come out with media like all this like alien invasion media, this idea of these Martians and UFOs and shit like that being alien as opposed to being human. So basically at the same time, Tesla died in 1943. You have all this crazy technological advancement, just off the walls, crazy advancement in a short amount of time, and then it just stopped. And now we do have really dope stuff in terms of cameras and microprocessors and stuff. Everything's on micro, and there's been no advancement in the macro. And
there hasn't been crazy innovation, it seems like. Like, it's very quiet, if that makes sense.
Yep. And we get a slow drip, all these things.
Neuralink, AI, the whole thing.
Yeah, Apple and Amazon. All these guys have ties to DARPA, for instance, which DARPA is the defense, it's like deep or whatever. It's a defense technology program.
Yep.
And basically all of our technology and our big tech CEOs, if you look close enough, a lot of the innovations are just leaked from DARPA. Like the internet was called the DARPA net originally. Like it was, they created the internet and implemented it. But innovations like the graphic user interface, DARPA gave it to Xerox. And then both Steve Jobs and Bill Gates both stole it from Xerox. So there's, a trickle effect there. Jeff Bezos I believe it was either his dad or his grandpa was the head of DARPA.
Was Bitcoin created by the government?
Yeah, so this goes into the final transition where we talked about one way to unite people is to have an outside force. The other way to get people the strongest decentralized movements is you can't have a centralized leader. And that's also why Bitcoin is so important and has so much power, because no one person made it. It's anonymous in that regard, which is the same reason why QAnon and Anonymous and in V for Vendetta, why he was so effective is because there's no central leader. There's no way to take down the movement. So you have the QAnon side, you have Anonymous, which by the way, you were talking about the Russiagate versus QAnon type deal. That was basically Blue Anon, and right now, I don't know if you're tapped into the leftist circles, but I dip my head in every once in a while, and they're all freaking out about Anonymous. They're like, Anonymous is back, and they're like, we're going to release something in 17 days, we're taking down the Trump administration, blah, blah, blah. And like leftists, like Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, which is he used to be a Bernie bro from the Bernie bro days. Now he's actually gotten much crazier since then, which is wild. But he's like literally making YouTube videos about, oh man, Anonymous is coming. And it's like, bro, this is literally what I was watching on the QAnon side back in 2017. So they're literally flipping the script on both sides, which is another great thing.
And keeping everybody distracted.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about the Marvel programming, it's like, oh, well, the people who most like Marvel, all like the leftist nerds, they're all libs. So how does it work? They like do a perfect split down the middle where all the actors from the Marvel movies, the actual actors, are all leftist, but all the archetypes, all the people who embody the real archetypes, they're all on the other side.
Yeah.
So you keep them, ideally what's important is you keep them split down the middle.
It's interesting because my analytical brain, it's probably just a too high IQ approach to it, but it's like, because I think about every scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because of those things, it removes the chaos and it brings order.
Mm-hmm.
QAnon brings order to the people that might actually go and do something.
Yep. Yeah.
And same on the other side.
That's a great point.
And it keeps everybody, in their place.
Mm-hmm.
Watch this. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Yep.
Believe.
Yep.
And then the agenda.
Trust the plan.
And then the agenda just goes on. Whether the agenda is good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
chaos is kept under wraps and
Mm-hmm.
kept order with these narratives.
Yep. That's a fantastic point. Because that is literally, and when you think of things like, oh, Musk saved us by buying Twitter, at the same time that Twitter and YouTube were all cracking down super hard, we had finally this, what seemed to be an advent of decentralized social media platforms built on blockchain that were actually uncensorable. But because Elon took over Twitter and reopened the floodgates, there was no longer a reason to be on those other ones. So once again, brings everybody back into the fold, where if somebody really goes off the rails, they still have the power to get rid of them. And those other platforms that were gaining some momentum now no longer have.
And they probably eased up some of the censor to keep people in these centralized places where they could still axe them if they wanted to.
Yep. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. It's really interesting, the dynamics of a lot of these things. We're coming up probably where we're going to lose camera battery and the whole thing. We're about 2 hours. What's a good way to end this in your opinion? What's a core message that you have for people? I think one thing that I want to mention is, although we talked about a bunch of like dark things, there is so much abundance. You mentioned this in the podcast. There is so much abundance. There is so much prosperity that we can have. We can build and create great things. We can live a free life, which we're doing right now on this podcast. Things can still be amazing, even with the impending approach of more tech, in our lives. I think it's important to mention, and I have a very positive outlook for everything, even though we're keeping it very real about what's happening and how it works. What's your final message if anybody's watching, my audience or your audience? What should they know?
Yeah, I guess it's, the only way that what we're talking about is disturbing and would be blackpilling, which I can understand why it would be to people who are really dug in deep, which I was at many times, dug in deep to the hero complex of literally looking at, Trump and Elon as being the Avengers. They're here to save us from the New World Order, Bill Gates, Thanos types. And actually, Musk literally called George Soros Magneto, which of course that would make Elon Professor X. But anyways, it's only disturbing if you are hero worshiping these guys and you look to them. You're looking outside yourself for being saved. I need these people to save me, otherwise my life's going to be horrible.
Very weak position to live from.
And it's it's a pitfall of being aware. It's kind of that IQ curve meme where the people on the very low end and the people on the very far end are actually getting to the same place, but the people in the middle are panicking and super disturbed. Because if you're moderately get into stuff and you learn enough to be in the super divisive point of left versus right, you're going to be freaking out all the time. It's my team winning, it's my team losing.
100%.
And just spurging out and not controlling your life and controlling your outcomes. But the people on the very far, they only care about their families and, having a nice life, enjoying themselves. And then the people on the very smart side are also, they've reached the same point where it's you can see past that illusion of the midwits that the midwits fall for.
I also think, something that I've talked about on podcasts before, I've talked about in some of my content, is a lot of people in the space that we're in refer to a lot of the people that run the world as elite. Why can't we become elite? Why can't you go and become powerful and successful and skilled enough to impact the world in the way you see fit.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's a reality.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what we're talking about right now,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's all within us. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you want to change something, change it for yourself first, then your
Mm-hmm.
family, then your community, and then the world.
Yeah.
And the media distribution of this is also a great example of that,
Mm-hmm.
where this message can be blasted everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
especially with you on live streams every day on Rumble.
Yeah. I can't wait. I gotta get on that. But it's exactly what you said. It's like people sometimes ask me, like one of the last shows I was on, he's like, if you were in control of the world, what's the number one thing you would do to, like, to make things better? And I was like, I don't think you can. I don't think there is there's nothing that I could do to everybody. You can't help. In general, you can't help people. Even in the best case scenario.
Sorry.
If all you did was live in absolute abundance and you got everything you wanted. Actually, this is one of the things we talked about the last time we were on a show together that all the people in the YouTube comments were freaking out about. But the mental exercise of put yourself in a situation where you get everything you want as soon as you want it. How quickly all the worldly pleasures and carnal, experiences would lose all meaning altogether, and soon all that would be novel is pain, which is what pain and torture and these like crazy perversions, which you can see in the Epstein types, etc., the Diddy types, where now the only thing that gives you a thrill is having a 5-day freak off, where you're fucking got people with Molly water IVs, and pools of baby oil. So that just goes to show you that it's like it doesn't matter if you can think, oh, I wish the world was so much better and I got everything I wanted and had all this absolute abundance for free. And that's actually not a great way either. So it's not a great way to live, and actually it's pretty horrible if you look at the Diddy types. So in general, it's actually everything's perfect right now. So everything's perfect right now. It's a matter of your perception. You always have, like we talked about before, there's always a choice. The only thing they can do to you is things you consent to, what you eat, what you consume, and the things you do. And yeah, so in general, actually everything's super dope. And you just gotta focus on building your family and yourself. And by helping yourself, another thing is like, when I said that on previous shows, people are like, oh, that's so selfish. What are you talking about? It's so crazy, like materialistic, whatever. And it's like the classic saying, the best way to help other people is to help yourself.
Yeah.
Your example, you can't tell people what to do, but you can lead by example.
Of course.
And you can lead by example to show your family, your friends, the people who you love and want to help. They're never gonna, if you just schizo rant to them all day about vaccines and whatever and crypto and whatever, they're not gonna give a fuck. But if you're rich and healthy, then they're gonna say, oh, well, maybe this guy is onto something. Yeah.
Dude,
but yeah, I think that's
I'm on the same wavelength, in the final point, what I was gonna say, I didn't want to interrupt you. I see it in business, you can't approach other people and say, I'm going to help you with this. Employees, clients, they have to accept that they need this and they have to ask for the help. You see it with friends, you see it with family members. They need to be in a position where they want the help and are seeking the help and the information or whatever it is, and then they'll make the change. And then they'll become that person that is free thinking or whatever it is in any regard. You're right. You can't force anybody to. You can't schizo rant.
Yeah, not effective. Not effective.
Amazing, dude. Thank you for doing this. This is awesome, and hopefully we do more in the future.
Hell yeah.
We do more in the future. I appreciate you.
Awesome. My
pleasure. Thank you so much, sir. And guys, if you want to follow him, I'm gonna really convince him after this to make a Rumble and start live streaming. So maybe the link will be there, but definitely his Twitter will be in the description. You can find me, all my links down below as well, and make sure to subscribe.